Imagine sitting in a quiet garden in ancient Athens. The trees provide shade, and students gather around a teacher dressed in a long robe. He speaks with calm confidence, asking his students questions instead of simply giving them answers. He wants them to think for themselves. He believes that asking questions is the best way to find truth. This man is named Plato, and he is one of the most important thinkers in history. Plato was born around 428 BCE in Athens, Greece. He came from a rich and respected family. As a boy, he studied poetry, music, gymnastics, and philosophy. People said he was smart and curious, always asking deep questions. At first, he wanted to become a writer or a politician, but then he met someone who would change his life, Socrates. Socrates was a famous teacher in Athens, though he didn't write anything down himself. Instead, he asked people questions to help them think clearly. He walked through the city talking with anyone who would listen. Plato became his student and followed him closely. He admired Socrates deeply and was inspired by the way he taught through conversation. But one day something terrible happened. Socrates was put on trial and sentenced to death. This shocked Plato. After Socrates died, Plato decided he would continue his teacher's work, not just by asking questions, but by writing them down so the world would never forget. Plato wrote many books, but they weren't like modern books. His writings were called dialogues. In each one, characters have conversations about big ideas like justice, love, knowledge, and government. Socrates was often the main speaker in these dialogues, even though he had already died. Plato used his voice to explore difficult questions and to honor his teacher's way of thinking. Plato believed that truth and wisdom came from thinking carefully and deeply, not just believing what others said. He taught that people should ask questions, explore ideas, and always seek what is right and good. He believed the world we see every day is not the only world. To Plato, there was also a world of perfect forms, invisible but real, where everything existed in its truest and best shape. For example, a circle drawn in the sand is not perfect, but the idea of a perfect circle lives in the world of forms. To him, learning meant remembering these perfect ideas that our souls once knew. Plato also cared deeply about how society should be organized. He believed that not all people should rule, but that the wisest people should. In his famous book, The Republic, Plato described a city ruled by philosopher kings, leaders who loved wisdom more than power. He imagined a place where people worked together for the common good, and where children were educated to become thoughtful, kind citizens. One of Plato's most powerful stories is called the Allegory of the Cave. In this story, people live their whole lives in a dark cave, watching shadows on a wall. They think the shadows are real because they have never seen anything else. But one person escapes the cave and sees the sun, the real world, and the truth. When he returns to tell the others, they don't believe him. This story reminds us that learning can be hard, and that people often fear new ideas, but truth is worth searching for. To share his ideas and teach others, Plato started a school called the Academy. It may have been the first school of higher learning in the Western world. Students there didn't just memorize facts, they asked questions, studied math and science, and talked about how to live a good life. The Academy stayed open for hundreds of years, even long after Plato died. It became a place where future thinkers would begin their own search for truth. One of those students was Aristotle, who later became a great teacher and scientist himself. Through Aristotle and others, Plato's ideas spread across the ancient world. Many years later, during the Renaissance and beyond, scholars in Europe rediscovered Plato's works. His questions about truth, beauty, and justice inspired writers, artists, and leaders. Plato's life teaches us many things. He showed that asking questions is powerful. He believed that real learning comes from thinking, not just copying answers. He stood up for wisdom, fairness, and knowledge, even when it was hard, and he believed that education could shape people and make the world better. Today, when we ask big questions, what is right? What is real? What makes a good person? We are following in Plato's footsteps. His ideas help shape how we learn, how we lead, and how we search for meaning. In fact, many of the values we learn in school, like thinking for ourselves, being honest, and treating others fairly, can be traced back to his teachings. Plato may have lived over 2,000 years ago, but his words are still read and studied. His dialogues are kept in libraries, taught in classrooms, and shared in books all over the world. Why? Because his questions are timeless. They help us understand ourselves, each other, and the world we live in. He didn't have a computer, a microscope, or even a blackboard, but he had something just as powerful: a curious mind and a desire to understand the truth. That's something anyone can have, including you. The next time you ask a question in class, or wonder how something works, or try to figure out what is fair, remember Plato. He believed that every person has the power to think, learn, and grow wiser. He believed that learning is not just about facts, it's about becoming a better person. So keep asking, keep thinking, keep wondering, because the search for truth and wisdom never ends. And that search began long ago with a man named Plato, walking through the gardens of Athens, asking his students the most important question of all: what do you think?